The air on the 47th floor of Hartley & Associates tasted like expensive coffee and quiet desperation. Olivia Munro had long since stopped noticing the former, but the latter clung to her like a second skin, persistent and suffocating in equal measure. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, and the glass-walled office stretched before her in geometric silence. Rows of empty desks, dormant computers. The distant hum of climate control, the only proof she wasn't completely alone in the world. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered with 1,000 lives she'd never touch. People who probably weren't drowning in medical bills and student debt and the suffocating weight of responsibility. She rubbed her eyes, the motion automatic, futile. The case files blurred together anyway, a sea of legal jargon that her exhausted brain could barely process. Her phone buzzed against the desk, screen illuminating with a number she recognized immediately. Mercy General Hospital, Patient Billing Department. Her hand hovered over the device like it might bite. It was the third call this week. She already knew what they wanted, could recite the script from memory. Past due balance, payment arrangements, the polite corporate euphemisms for your brother needs treatment and you can't afford it. The call went to voicemail. She'd answer tomorrow, or the next day. When she had an answer that wasn't, I'm trying, or please wait, or I don't know what else to do. Benjamin Munro, Ben, always Ben, never Benjamin except on hospital forms, was 19 years old and should have been worrying about midterms and campus parties, and which major would disappoint their father least. Instead, he was fighting leukemia for the second time, and Olivia was fighting an invoice that read like a ransom note. $43,000, that's what hope cost apparently. That's what keeping her baby brother alive for another round of treatment would take. She'd borrowed from everyone who'd lend, maxed out 2 credit cards, picked up weekend transcription work that left her eyes burning and her spine a column of fire. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. The paralegal exam loomed in 6 weeks, her third attempt, her last chance. Pass. And maybe she could claw her way up to a position that actually paid enough to matter. Fail and she'd plateau here forever, invisible and insufficient, watching lawyers like Julian Hartley glide past her desk without so much as a glance of recognition. Julian Hartley, senior partner at 32, heir to the Hartley legal empire, a man so cold and controlled that office rumors questioned whether he had a pulse beneath those immaculate suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She'd worked here for 2 years. He'd spoken directly to her maybe 4 times, always brief, always transactional. Miss Munro, I need the Davidson files. Miss Munro, has discovery been filed? Never Olivia. Never anything that acknowledged she was human rather than furniture. And yet, somehow, tomorrow morning she had a meeting in his office. A meeting his assistant had scheduled with no explanation, just a curt email. Mr. Hartley requests your presence, 9 a.m. sharp. She should be nervous. Mostly she was too tired to care. Olivia gathered her things, a worn canvas bag that had seen better years, the jacket that didn't quite keep out the autumn chill, the travel mug she'd refilled 4 times today, with break room coffee that tasted like burnt regret. The elevator descended in silence, her reflection ghost-like in the polished doors, auburn hair escaping its practical ponytail, shadows under hazel eyes, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. The lobby security guard, Marcus, one of the few people in this building who actually saw her, nodded as she passed. Night, Miss Munro, get some rest. You too, Marcus. Outside, the October air bit through her insufficient jacket. The subway would take 40 minutes. Her apartment waited in a neighborhood the lawyers here would never visit, small and shabby, and home in all the ways that mattered and didn't. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Ben. Hey, she answered, unable to keep the exhaustion from her voice. You're still at work? Not a question. He knew her too well. Just leaving. How are you feeling? Like a pincushion with a philosophy degree. His humor, dark and relentless, was both coping mechanism and shield. Listen, I talked to Dr. Patel today. Her stomach dropped. And? We need to schedule the next round soon. Like, next 2 weeks soon. A pause, heavy with everything he wasn't saying. Liv, I've been thinking, maybe I should take a semester off. Get a job. I can help with. Absolutely not. Her voice came sharper than intended. You're staying in school. That's not negotiable. But the money. I'll figure it out. I always do. A lie, but a necessary one. He had enough to carry without adding her failures to the weight. Silence stretched between them, filled with sibling telepathy and shared worry. I love you, Ben said finally, quietly. Love you too. Get some sleep. She ended the call before he could argue further, before he could hear the crack in her composure. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to find $43,000. The impossibility of it sat in her chest like a stone. The next morning arrived with brutal efficiency. Olivia stood outside Julian Hartley's office at precisely 8:58 a.m., professional armor in place, hair tamed, modest blouse, the confidence she didn't feel worn like borrowed jewelry. His assistant, a woman whose name Olivia had never learned and who'd never bothered to learn hers, gestured toward the door with a manicured hand. He's expecting you. Olivia knocked. A voice, crisp and cold, invited her in. Julian Hartley's office was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, absolutely devoid of personality. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a conquest. The desk, dark wood, probably imported, definitely worth more than her car, held nothing but a laptop, a single file folder, and a watch that caught the morning light like a small winking fortune. And behind that desk sat Julian Hartley himself. He didn't look up immediately, finishing whatever email commanded his attention with the same precise focus he apparently applied to everything. Dark hair, perfectly styled, a suit that moved like liquid shadow, tailored to mathematical precision. When he finally raised his eyes, steel gray, sharp enough to cut, she felt the assessment like a physical thing. Miss Monroe, sit. Not an invitation, a command. She sat, back straight, hands folded. Meeting his gaze with the professionalism that was her only currency here, he studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then he opened the file folder, and she saw her own employee photo staring back. You've been with the firm for 2 years, he said, not a question. Yes, your work is adequate, punctual, no complaints from the partners you've assisted. He said it like he was reading a grocery list, clinical and detached. Thank you, she managed, though it didn't feel like a compliment. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and something flickered across his face. Irritation, perhaps, or resignation. He answered. Mother, I'm in a meeting. A pause. Yes, I'm aware of the date. Another pause, longer this time. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's not... No, I don't have. Mother, this is neither the time nor... He closed his eyes briefly, a crack in the perfect control. Fine, yes, Friday. I'll handle it. He ended the call with more force than necessary. The silence that followed hummed with tension. When he looked at her again, something had shifted. The calculation in his gaze had sharpened, taken on a desperate edge she recognized because she wore it herself. Miss Monroe, he said slowly, as if testing each word. Are you currently in a relationship? Her brain stuttered. I'm sorry? It's a simple question. Are you seeing anyone? Romantically involved? Engaged? No, but I don't see how. You're single. You need money. Not questions, statements. I've seen the pay advance requests, the extra shifts. You're drowning financially. Heat flooded her face. Shame, anger, the humiliation of being seen when she'd worked so hard to be invisible. That's none of your I'm not judging, Miss Monroe. I'm calculating. He leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. I have a proposition for you, one that benefits us both. Every instinct screamed danger. What kind of proposition? I need a girlfriend for 1 week. You need money. I'm offering $15,000 for 7 days of your time. The number hit her like cold water. 15,000. Not enough for everything, but enough for now. Enough through Ben's next treatment. Enough to breathe. You want to pay me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. I want to pay you to accompany me to family events and convince my mother I'm in a stable relationship. There's a difference. Why? That's not your concern. If you're asking me to lie to your family, it absolutely is my concern. His expression didn't change, but she saw the recalculation happening behind those cold eyes. My mother has convinced herself that my dedication to work makes me unfit for partnership advancement. She's threatening to influence the board unless I demonstrate appropriate work-life balance. The words came clipped, bitter. She wants to see me settled. I want her interference to end. This is the most efficient solution. You could just date someone, actually. I don't have time for the inefficiency of real relationships, Miss Monroe. I have time for a mutually beneficial arrangement. She should walk out. This was insane. This was possibly unethical. This was definitely the kind of choice that couldn't be unmade. How much time do I have to decide? He checked that expensive watch. 1 hour. This offer won't be repeated. Olivia stood, legs somehow steady despite everything. I'll need to think about it. Of course. He returned his attention to his laptop, dismissing her. My assistant will await your answer. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Miss Monroe. She turned. He was looking at her now. Really looking, and for a brief second, she saw something almost human beneath the ice. For what it's worth, I don't make this request lightly, but I am desperate, and I suspect you are too. The honesty of it, stark and uncomfortable, settled between them like a binding contract not yet signed. 1 hour, she repeated, and left before she could do something catastrophic, like agree without thinking it through. But in the elevator, descending toward the lobby and reality and impossible choices, she already knew her answer. $43,000. Ben's treatment. 2 weeks. $15,000 wouldn't cover everything, but it would cover enough. She thought of her brother, 19 and hopeful, despite everything. She thought of that hospital bill. She thought of Julian Hartley's cold desperation matching her own. 1 week. 7 days. How hard could it be? At 58 minutes, she returned to his office. I'll do it, she said. When do we start? 48 hours later, Olivia stood in a boutique where even the air smelled expensive, something between leather and lilies, and money so old it had forgotten its origins. The kind of place where sales associates looked like models and prices existed only as discreet whispers between those who belonged. She didn't belong. The dress they'd pulled for her cost more than 2 months of her rent. Emerald silk that caught light like water, backless, elegant in a way that felt like speaking a language she'd never learned. She stared at her reflection and saw a stranger wearing her face. It's perfect, said the woman Julian had sent, Catherine, his mother's personal assistant, all sleek efficiency and judgmental eyebrows. Mrs. Hartley will approve. Olivia wasn't sure if that was meant to be comforting. The past 2 days had been a hurricane of preparation. Catherine had appeared at her apartment yesterday morning with coffee and a dossier thick enough to be a doctoral thesis. The Hartley family history, complete with photographs, business holdings, social connections, and enough rules to govern a small nation. You met Julian at a firm. Events 6 months ago, Catherine had recited, flipping through pages. You bonded over a discussion about corporate litigation reform. He asked you to dinner 3 weeks later. You've been seeing each other quietly since. Why quietly? Olivia had asked. Taking notes like this was a deposition. Because Julian values privacy. And because it makes the relationship more believable when it's finally revealed. Catherine's smile was thin. Mrs. Hartley appreciates a certain narrative progression. The story they'd built was simple, plausible, and felt nothing like the truth. Which was the point, Olivia supposed. Now dressed in silk and standing in a boutique that made her want to apologize for breathing. She felt the weight of the lie settling around her shoulders like the expensive coat Catherine was currently having wrapped. Her phone buzzed. Julian's name appeared on screen. Dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. No greeting, no question, just expectation. She typed back, where? Luciana's. Wear the green dress. Of course, he already knew which dress. He probably approved it before she'd even seen it. Luciana's turned out to be the kind of restaurant where reservations required acts of God or significant wealth, preferably both. Olivia arrived in a car that cost more than her education, wearing a dress that made her feel like a beautiful fraud, and found Julian waiting at a table positioned for maximum visibility. He stood when she approached, good manners so ingrained they were practically genetic. In the soft lighting, wearing a suit that made him look like he'd been carved from expensive stone, he was devastating in an entirely impersonal way. Miss Monroe. He pulled out her chair. I thought we were supposed to be dating, she said quietly, sitting. Shouldn't you call me Olivia? Something flickered across his face. Of course, Olivia. Her name and his voice sounded strange, too formal, like he was testing the weight of it. A waiter appeared with wine she hadn't ordered. poured with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious ceremonies. Julian waited until they were alone again before speaking. My mother will join us in approximately 20 minutes. This is a trial run. He said it like he was briefing her for a deposition. She'll test you. Your background, your intentions, your suitability. Do not be offended by her directness. Comforting, Olivia muttered, taking a drink of wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. I need you to understand something. His voice dropped, intimate despite its coldness. Victoria Hartley does not accept easily. She has very specific expectations about who belongs in this family, and I don't meet them. Not remotely. He said it without cruelty, just fact. But you will by the time this week ends. That's what I'm paying you for. The reminder of the transaction stung more than it should have. She'd signed the contract yesterday, literally signed it, because Julian Hartley did nothing without documentation. $15,000 deposited that morning, already transferred to Mercy General Hospital's billing department. Ben's treatment was scheduled for next week. That should have made everything worth it. Tell me something real, she said suddenly. If we're supposed to be dating, I should know something about you that's not in a dossier. Julian's fingers tightened around his wineglass, the only tell that she'd surprised him. That's not necessary. It is if you want this to be convincing. She leaned forward slightly. What's your favorite color? What do you do when you're not working? What's the last thing that made you laugh? The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. I don't remember, he said finally. The last thing that made me laugh. The honesty of it, stark and sad, hit her harder than any amount of coldness could have. Before she could respond, a presence descended on their table like an elegant storm. Victoria Hartley was exactly what Olivia had expected, and somehow worse. Silver hair twisted into a flawless chignon, a dress that probably had a designer pedigree longer than Olivia's family tree, and eyes that assessed and dismissed in the same sweeping glance. Julian. She offered her cheek for a kiss that her son delivered with mechanical precision. And this must be the mystery woman you finally deigned to introduce. Mother, this is Olivia Monroe. Olivia, my mother, Victoria Hartley. Olivia stood, extending her hand. Victoria took it with the grip of someone shaking hands with the help. How lovely to finally meet you, Victoria said, the words gracious, and the tone anything but. Julian has been remarkably secretive about your relationship. One might wonder what he's been hiding. They sat, a waiter materializing to take orders Olivia barely processed. Victoria positioned herself with the ease of someone used to commanding rooms, attention, outcomes. So tell me, Olivia, I may call you Olivia? Without waiting for answer, how exactly did you meet my son? Here it was, the performance. At a firm event last spring, Olivia said, the lie smooth because she'd practiced it a dozen times. We ended up in the same conversation about litigation reform. I didn't know who he was at first. How convenient. Victoria's smile was a weapon. And what is it you do at Hartley and Associates? I'm a paralegal, contract division. Ah, how industrious. The pause before the compliment spoke volumes. And your family? Where are you from originally? The interrogation had begun in earnest. Questions wrapped in politeness, each one designed to catalog her inadequacies. Where did she go to school? What did her father do? Had she spent any time abroad? Did she have connections in the city? Each answer, state school, small-town lawyer, no, and no, landed like a failed test. Through it all, Julian remained silent, watching with those cold gray eyes, offering nothing. Olivia felt herself drowning, each question a stone added to the weight pulling her under. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here, in this restaurant, in this dress, pretending to be someone who could fit into Julian Hartley's manufactured world. Then, under the table, something unexpected. A hand found hers, warm, steady, squeezed gently. She glanced at Julian. He was looking at his mother, expression unchanged, but his fingers were laced with hers, in a gesture that felt nothing like the man she'd met in his office. Mother, he said, voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. Olivia is here because I want her here. Her background is irrelevant to me. I hope it will be to you as well. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I simply want to know who my son is spending time with. Now you know. Still holding Olivia's hand beneath the table, thumb moving in small circles against her palm, that felt intentional, comforting, real. The dinner continued, tension settling like fog. But that hand stayed in hers, an anchor in the storm of Victoria's polite evisceration. When they finally escaped to the street, cool October air a relief after the suffocating restaurant, Olivia turned to him. "That was worse than I expected. She was testing you. You passed." "I passed?" She practically catalogued all the ways I'm insufficient. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. If she truly found you insufficient, she would have left after the appetizer. She stayed for dessert. That's approval, in Victoria Hartley terms. He'd moved closer without her noticing, near enough that she could see her reflection in those gray eyes. Could smell whatever expensive cologne he wore that probably had a name in Italian. "The hand-holding," she said quietly. "That was a nice touch, very convincing." His expression shifted, something uncertain crossing it. Yes, convincing. They stood there in the streetlight glow, the city moving around them, and Olivia felt the evening tilt into something she couldn't name. "I should go," she said, stepping back. "Of course. The car will take you home." But as he walked away, she saw him run a hand through his hair, casual, relaxed, so unlike the controlled Julian from dinner, a gesture that felt wrong somehow, out of character. The car ride home passed in a blur. Her phone buzzed as she reached her apartment building. Julian's name on screen. "Thank you for tonight. You were better than I expected." She stared at the message. The phrasing felt off. Julian Hartley didn't thank people. He acknowledged adequate performance. The next morning, she passed him in the office hallway. Professional distance reestablished, back to the cold efficiency she recognized. "Mr. Hartley," she said, "about last night. Thank you for the support with your mother." And the hair thing was subtle, but it worked. He stopped walking, turned slowly. "What hair thing?" His voice carried genuine confusion, his expression that familiar ice. "When we left the restaurant, you ran your hand through your hair," she demonstrated. "It made you seem more relaxed, less formal. Nice detail." Julian stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. "Miss Monroe, I dropped you at your car and returned to my apartment." "I didn't." He trailed off, and she watched the calculation happen in real time. "What time did dinner end?" "Around 9:30. You walked me out. We talked on the street. Then I left at 9:15. His voice had gone very quiet, very controlled. "Directly after my mother departed." The hallway tilted. "Then who?" But she knew. Even before she finished the question, she knew. Julian's jaw tightened. "Come with me. Now." The conference room Julian pulled her into was glass-walled and empty. Morning lights spilling across the table like an interrogation spotlight. He closed the door with controlled precision, the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes. "Explain exactly what happened after my mother left," he said. Not asked, demanded. Olivia's thoughts were racing, tripping over themselves. He, whoever he was, walked me to the street. We talked about your mother's approval. He stood close, and I thought." She pressed her palms against the cool table. "Who was I with?" Julian pulled out his phone, jaw tight. He typed something, then turned the screen toward her. A photo. 2 men, identical, standing on what looked like a beach years ago, younger, smiling. The kind of candid shot that spoke of a time before everything hardened. "My brother," Julian said, the word sharp as broken glass. "Jackson, my twin brother." The room tilted again. Twin. Of course. The warmth, the ease, the way he'd touched her hand like comfort instead of transaction. "He switched with you?" "Apparently." Julian was already dialing, phone to his ear. "This is vintage Jackson, impulsive, reckless, thinking he's..." Into the phone. "Where are you? Don't lie. I know what you did." A pause. Even from across the table, Olivia could hear the voice on the other end. Same timbre as Julian's, but lighter somehow, amused. "My office, 30 minutes. This isn't negotiable." Julian ended the call, set the phone down with the kind of care that suggested he wanted to throw it. "I should leave," Olivia said. "This is clearly a family issue, and you're part of this now. You were there. You're owed an explanation." "I'm owed $15,000 and the week we agreed on. That's all." Something flickered in his eyes that might have been respect. "Nevertheless, stay." 28 minutes later, Because of course Julian tracked time like that. The conference room door opened. Jackson Hartley walked in like he owned the space, which genetically speaking, he partially did. He wore jeans and a Henley, leather jacket slung over one shoulder, hair just slightly too long and unstyled. Same face as Julian, same steel gray eyes, but everything else was different, looser, warmer, like someone had taken Julian's code and rewritten it in a major key. His gaze found Olivia immediately, and he smiled. "So you figured it out. I was hoping for at least another day." "What the hell were you thinking?" Julian's voice could have frozen water. "I was thinking you'd screw this up." Jackson dropped into a chair, utterly at ease. "And I was right. She looked miserable when I found her outside the restaurant." "You found her, you followed us?" "I was curious. Sue me." He turned to Olivia. "For what?" "At its worth, you handled Victoria brilliantly. Most people crumble under that level of aristocratic judgment. Answer me." Julian's control was fracturing at the edges. "Why?" "Because I heard about your idiotic plan and decided to intervene." Jackson leaned back, casual where his brother was rigid. "You were going to treat this woman like a business acquisition. Someone needed to actually make her feel like a person. This is a business arrangement. She understands that. Does she?" Jackson's eyes met Olivia's again, something searching in them. "Do you want to be treated like a line item in his portfolio? Because that's Julian's specialty, reducing people to their utility." The truth of it stung, because she'd felt exactly that in Julian's office, signing contracts while he calculated her worth in purely transactional terms. "That's not," Julian started. "It's exactly that." Jackson stood, moved closer to Olivia. "Let me guess. He presented this as a mutually beneficial arrangement, clinical, efficient, no messy emotions required." She said nothing, which was answer enough. "Here's what my brother didn't tell you," Jackson continued. "Victoria isn't just pushing him to date. She's threatening to give the senior partnership to our cousin Marcus, unless Julian proves he's stable enough for the responsibility. This isn't about work-life balance. It's about control, and Julian's solution is to fake the one thing he's incapable of actually doing." "That's enough." Julian's voice cut like a blade. "Is it?" "Because I think Olivia deserves to know what she's actually signed up for." Jackson turned to his brother. "You're using her. At least own it." The silence that followed hummed with years of something: resentment, competition, fractures that ran deeper than tonight. Olivia found her voice. "You both used me. He paid me to lie. You lied about who you were. I'm not sure which is worse." "I'm worse," Julian said quietly. Jackson acts on impulse. "I calculated this. Deliberately involved you in family politics that aren't your concern." The admission surprised her more than anything else that morning. Jackson laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Character growth. How novel." "Get out," Julian said. "No." Jackson crossed his arms. "Because here's the thing. Victoria loved her." He pointed at Olivia. In her own twisted way, she approved. "And there are 4 more events this week. The partner dinner Tuesday, the charity gala Friday, the family brunch Sunday. I'm aware of the schedule." "Then you're aware you can't cover all of them and prepare for the Hendricks trial." Julian's jaw tightened. He'd forgotten, Olivia realized, or hadn't thought that far ahead. "So here's my proposal," Jackson continued. "Let me finish what I started. I'll be you at the social events. You focus on your case, everyone wins." "Absolutely not." "Why? Afraid I'll do a better job at being human than you are?" The hit landed. Olivia watched Julian absorb it, saw something crack behind those cold eyes. His phone rang. Victoria's name on screen. He answered, listened, his expression growing tighter with each passing second. "Yes, Mother. Tuesday at 7, of course." He ended the call. "She's added a cocktail party tomorrow night. Partner spouses. Currently she's telling everyone about her son's new relationship. Can't disappoint her now," Jackson said lightly. Julian looked between them, his brother relaxed and smirking, and Olivia, caught in a web she hadn't agreed to spin. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone making a choice he hated. "Modified terms. Jackson covers the social events as me. I appear when absolutely necessary. Miss Monroe maintains the same arrangement, but the payment increases to $25,000. I'll add $10,000 from my own account, Jackson said, for the inconvenience of dealing with both of us. Olivia's head spun. $25,000. That would cover Ben's treatment and the next 3 months of expenses. That was breathing room. That was time. Why, she asked Jackson. Why do you even care about this? He met her eyes, and for a moment the charm dropped away, replaced by something genuine. Because I saw you at the firm holiday party last year. You were helping one of the caterers clean up a spill, while everyone else pretended not to notice. You were kind when no one was watching. He paused. I wanted to know who you were. This seemed like an opportunity. The honesty of it disarmed her completely. This is insane, she said. It is, Julian agreed. But it's also functional. You get more money. I get the time I need for the trial. Jackson gets whatever satisfaction he derives from interfering in my life. And what do I get? Jackson asked. Besides the joy of sabotaging you? Supervised access to the family events you've avoided for 2 years. Mother's been asking about you. Something complicated crossed Jackson's face. Fine. But we do this right. No half measures. If I'm playing you convincingly. Julian nodded once, sharp, then turned to Olivia. The choice is yours, Miss Monroe. Walk away now, keep the $15,000, and we'll find another solution. Or accept the new terms. She should walk away. This had already spiraled beyond anything reasonable. 2 brothers, 1 fake relationship, and enough family dysfunction to stock a therapist's entire career. But $25,000. Ben's face when the doctor said they could move forward with treatment. The relief of not drowning, even temporarily. What are the new rules? She asked. Julian pulled out his phone, already drafting. You cannot reveal the twin switch to anyone, especially not Victoria. You'll coordinate with Jackson for social events, with me for anything firm-related. All previous contract terms remain in effect. Except the part about it being impersonal, Jackson added. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it as a real relationship. She needs to actually look like she wants to be there. That wasn't part of, Julian started. It is now. Take it or leave it. The brothers stared at each other. Years of unspoken battles playing out in seconds. Fine, Julian said finally. But Jackson, if you compromise this arrangement, I know. You'll destroy me in ways both creative and legal. I've heard the speech. Jackson turned to Olivia, held out his hand. So, partners in deception. She looked at that outstretched hand, then at Julian's controlled fury, then at the phone in her bag that held hospital billing notices and her brother's treatment schedule. She shook Jackson's hand. Partners. His grip was warm, steady, nothing like Julian's calculated touches. First event is the cocktail party tomorrow night, Julian said, already moving toward the door. Jackson will collect you at 6. Dress code is cocktail attire. Catherine will coordinate. He left without another word, the door closing with quiet finality. Jackson watched his brother go, something unreadable in his expression. Then he looked at Olivia and smiled, real warmth in it. This is going to be either the best or worst decision you've ever made. I'm increasingly sure it's the latter, she said. Probably. But at least it won't be boring. He headed for the door, paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. About seeing you. About wanting to know you. Then he was gone too, leaving Olivia alone in the glass-walled room with the morning sun and the growing certainty that she'd just agreed to something far more complicated than she'd bargained for. Her phone buzzed. Ben. Treatment's confirmed for next week. Doctor says the new payment cleared everything. Liv, how did you? Don't worry about it, she said, watching the city through the windows. I figured it out. Like she always did. Even when figuring it out meant diving into beautiful, lucrative chaos with 2 brothers who wore the same face but couldn't have been more different. The Hartley estate materialized through morning fog like something from a Gothic novel. All stone and ivy and old money solidified into architecture. Olivia sat in Jackson's vintage convertible, a car so different from Julian's corporate sedan, it might as well have been a different species, and tried not to feel completely out of her depth. Breathe, Jackson said, killing the engine. Victoria's worse in restaurants. At home, she's only moderately terrifying. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. He came around, opened her door with an ease that felt natural rather than performed. Ready to meet the extended horrors? Sunday brunch at the Hartley ancestral home, Catherine had explained via 14 text messages, was a monthly tradition. Victoria's closest friends, a few strategic business connections, and whatever family members were currently in favor. Today that apparently included Julian, Jackson pretending to be Julian, and Olivia as the relationship that would save them all. The dress Catherine had selected was cream silk, elegant without trying too hard, the kind of thing that whispered expensive rather than screamed it. Jackson had arrived precisely on time, looking devastatingly handsome in casual slacks and a sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but somehow looked effortless on him. Inside, the house was exactly what she'd expected, and worse. High ceilings, oil paintings of disapproving ancestors. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it had been here for generations. A server materialized to take their coats, and Olivia felt Jackson's hand settle on her lower back, warm through the thin silk. "Showtime," he murmured. The dining room was sun-drenched and filled with people who looked like they'd been styled by the same expensive designer. Victoria presided at the head of the table, silver hair catching light, smile sharp as she spotted them. "Julian, darling, and Olivia, how lovely you could join us." The warmth in her voice was calculated, perfect for the audience of society matrons who turned to assess the newcomer. Jackson played his part flawlessly, kissed his mother's cheek, pulled out Olivia's chair, made introductions with Julian's reserved politeness. But underneath the performance, Olivia felt the difference. His hand lingered at her elbow. His smile, when he looked at her, carried genuine warmth. Brunch was an endurance test disguised as hospitality. Victoria's friends asked questions wrapped in pleasantries, each one designed to catalog inadequacies. Where did she summer? What clubs did her family belong to? Had she been presented at any of the debutante balls? Each no landed like a small failure. Through it all, Jackson was a steady presence beside her. When Mrs. Ashford made a particularly pointed comment about appropriate breeding, his hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. When conversation turned to his work at the firm, territory he couldn't navigate as well, Olivia steered them towards safer subjects. They were a team, she realized, covering each other's weaknesses, playing to strengths. After the meal, Victoria insisted on giving Olivia a tour of the gardens. Translation: private interrogation without witnesses. They walked through rose beds that probably cost more to maintain than Olivia's annual salary, Victoria's heels clicking against stone pads. "You handled my friends well," Victoria said. "Better than I expected." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They're easy compared to what's coming." Victoria stopped by a marble fountain, turned to face her directly. "The Charity Gala Friday is where Julian's professional reputation will be solidified or destroyed. The board will be watching. Marcus will be circling. You understand what's at stake? I understand Julian's career is important to you. Julian's career is the family legacy, everything we've built for generations." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Tell me, Olivia, what do you want from my son?" The question was a trap. Want too little, and she was using him. Want too much, and she was a gold digger. "I want him to be happy," Olivia said carefully. "Whatever that looks like." Victoria studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "A diplomatic answer. Perhaps you're not as unsuitable as I initially thought." It wasn't approval, not quite, but it wasn't dismissal either. They returned to find Jackson on the terrace, talking with an older gentleman about architecture. He lit up when he saw Olivia, an expression that felt too genuine for performance. "Survived the interrogation?" he asked when Victoria moved away. "Barely. Does she ever actually approve of anyone?" "She approved of no one until they proved themselves indispensable. Then she takes credit for discovering them." He guided her down terrace steps toward a garden path. "Come on. I want to show you something before we have to go back to pretending I'm the boring twin." The path led to a greenhouse, glass walls hazed with age and moisture. Inside, it was warm and green and alive, so different from the formal gardens. "Julian and I used to hide here as kids," Jackson said, running his hand along an orchid's leaves. "When the expectations got too heavy. When being a Hartley felt like drowning." "Which one of you felt that more?" Olivia asked quietly. "Both of us. We just responded differently." He turned to face her, leaning against a potting table. He became what they wanted. Perfect, controlled, exactly the air they needed. I ran, started my own firm, doing the architecture they considered beneath us. We haven't really talked in 2 years. Why? Because he thinks I abandoned the family. I think he abandoned himself. Jackson's voice carried old hurt. And we're both probably right. The honesty of it created intimacy in the humid greenhouse air. Olivia found herself moving closer, drawn by the realness of him. "Why did you really switch with him that first night?" she asked. "I told you. I wanted to know you." "That's not the whole truth." Jackson smiled, but it was edged with something complicated. "No. I also wanted to prove I could do what he does. Be charming, handle Victoria, play the perfect son. And maybe I wanted him to see that his way isn't the only way." That's a lot of motivation for crashing a dinner. "I contain multitudes." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But mostly, I saw you in that photo Julian had, and I remember watching you at that party. The way you helped someone without hesitation, without calculating what you'd get from it." His fingers lingered against her jaw. Olivia's breath caught. "Jackson, I know, this is fake, performance, business arrangement," but he didn't move away. "Doesn't mean I can't acknowledge that you're remarkable." The air between them grew thick, charged with something neither of them could name or should want. Footsteps on the path outside broke the moment. Jackson stepped back just as one of Victoria's friends appeared, all-knowing smiles. "There you are. We thought you'd gotten lost." The drive back to the city was quiet, Sunday traffic and unspoken thoughts. Jackson pulled up outside Olivia's building, killed the engine. "Tuesday night is the partner dinner," he said. "I'll pick you up at 6:30. It'll be more formal than today." "Okay." She should get out, end this before it became complicated. "Jackson, what happened in the greenhouse was me forgetting the rules, won't happen again." But the way he looked at her suggested it absolutely would. Tuesday arrived with the weight of consequences. Catherine delivered another dress, midnight blue this time, with a neckline that managed to be elegant and devastating. Jackson picked her up exactly on time. And if he noticed how the dress transformed her, his only tell was a slight pause before opening the car door. The partner dinner was at some downtown establishment where the lighting was intimate and the prices weren't listed. Julian's colleagues and their spouses filled a private room. All easy conversation and inside jokes that reminded Olivia she didn't belong. Jackson navigated it brilliantly, playing Julian's reserved professionalism in public while staying close enough to ground her. When conversation turned to cases she couldn't follow, his hand found the small of her back. When someone made an assumption about her background, he redirected with Julian's precision. But in the quieter moments, waiting for drinks, moving between conversations, the mask slipped. He'd lean in close, whisper commentary that made her bite back laughter. Catch her like he couldn't help it. Small contacts that felt more real than performance. During dinner, seated next to him while plates of food she couldn't name appeared and disappeared, Olivia felt the line between fake and real beginning to blur dangerously. "You're good at this," she said quietly, while others were distracted by wine service. "At pretending to be my brother? At making me forget we're pretending at all." His hand found hers under the table, and this time it didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like want. In the bathroom later, she stared at her reflection and tried to remember the rules. This was a job. Jackson was playing a part. The warmth, the touches, the way he looked at her like she mattered, all performance. Except it didn't feel like performance anymore. She returned to find a woman talking to Jackson, blonde and polished in the way that suggested old money and older connections. Claire, she'd later learn. Julian's ex, the one Victoria had preferred. "Julian," Claire was saying, hand on his arm with familiar ease. "We should have coffee, catch up properly." Jackson's smile was perfectly Julian, polite, distant, revealing nothing. "I'm quite busy at the moment, Claire, but thank you." Claire's gaze slid to Olivia, assessment sharp. "Of course, with your new project." The dismissal stung more than it should have. Later, outside in cool October air waiting for the car, Jackson turned to her. "She's wrong. You're not a project." "How did you—" "Your face. You believe what she said." Olivia looked away. "Doesn't matter what I believe. This isn't real anyway." "Isn't it?" He moves closer, caught her chin gently, made her meet his eyes. "Because it's starting to feel real to me. Dangerously real." The confession hung between them like a bridge or a trap. Jackson, we can't. I know, rules, boundaries, business arrangement. His thumb traced her jaw. But if this were real, if you weren't caught up in my family's dysfunction, I'd ask you to dinner. Actually dinner, not performance dinner. What would be different? Everything. NG. Nothing. I'd tell you about the affordable housing project I'm designing. You'd tell me about why you became a paralegal instead of a lawyer. We'd talk until the restaurant closed, and then keep talking in the car. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. And then? Then I'd walk you to your door and ask if I could see you again, and hope you'd say yes. The car pulled up before she could respond, if she even had a response that wouldn't destroy everything. The ride to her apartment was silent, but Jackson's hand stayed in hers. At her building, he walked her to the door like he'd described, stood close in the streetlight glow, looking at her like she was something precious and temporary. Thank you for tonight, he said quietly. That's my line. No. Thank you for being remarkable, for handling Claire and the partners and all of it with more grace than any of them deserved. He leaned in, and for one breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle and devastating. Good night, Olivia. Then he was gone, leaving her on the doorstep with her heart racing and the certainty that she was falling for a man she'd been hired to pretend to love. The irony wasn't lost on her. Inside her apartment, she found a text waiting. Not Jackson, Julian. Friday is the gala. I'll be handling it personally. Jackson's done enough. She stared at the message, at the cold efficiency of it, and realized she didn't know which brother she was supposed to be falling for anymore, or which one was real. Friday arrived like a sentence being carried out. Olivia stood in yet another hotel suite, this one larger, more expensive, the kind of place where even the silence cost money, while a stylist pinned her hair into something elegant and unrecognizable. The dress hanging nearby was deep sapphire, backless and devastating, the kind of gown that demanded confidence she didn't feel. She hadn't seen Jackson since Tuesday night. Hadn't heard from him either, just radio silence that felt deliberate. Julian's doing probably, establishing boundaries, reasserting control. The knock at the door came at precisely 7 o'clock. She knew before opening it that she'd find Julian, not Jackson. Knew it would hurt more than it should. He stood in the hallway in a tuxedo that made him look carved from shadows and expensive fabric, every inch the controlled air she'd met in his office weeks ago. His eyes swept over her, clinical assessment that found her acceptable. Miss Monroe, you look appropriate. Not beautiful, not stunning. Appropriate. The distance between that word and Jackson's breathless admiration felt like a chasm. Thank you, she managed. The car ride to the venue was silent, except for Julian's occasional instructions. Smile, but not too much. Let him guide conversations. Victoria would be watching for any sign of weakness. The partnership vote happened Monday. Tonight was the final performance that would determine everything. He said it all without looking at her, gaze fixed on his phone, already distant. Are you nervous? She asked finally. Nervousness implies uncertainty about outcome. I've prepared adequately. He glanced up. Are you? Terrified, actually. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd admitted it. You've handled everything prior with competence. Tonight will be no different. It wasn't reassurance, but coming from Julian, it might have been the closest thing. The Hartley Foundation Charity Gala was exactly the kind of event Olivia had only seen in movies, a ballroom that glittered like a jewelry box, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across women in gowns that cost more than cars, and men in tuxedos that whispered power. Old money and older names, the kind of people who shaped cities with phone calls. Julian's hand settled at her back as they entered. Correct pressure in the exact right place, but it felt nothing like Jackson's touch. Cold where Jackson had been warm, calculated where Jackson had been genuine. Victoria descended on them immediately, resplendent in silver that matched her hair, approval in her eyes as she took in Olivia's appearance. Julian, darling, Olivia, you look lovely. She air-kissed both cheeks. The board members are eager to meet her properly, Judge Whitmore particularly. What followed was a carefully choreographed tour of influence. Julian introduced her to partners, judges, clients whose names she recognized from case files. Each introduction was performed with perfect precision. His hand always at her back or elbow, claiming her with touches that felt more like property markers than affection. She smiled, said the right things, played the role of supportive girlfriend who was smart enough to be interesting but not threatening. And through it all, she felt the wrongness of it settling into her bones. This was the original deal, the transaction she'd agreed to. Julian was giving her exactly what she'd signed up for: professional performance, appropriate behavior, the $15,000 she'd already received. So why did it feel like drowning? "Excuse me," she murmured during a lull in introductions. "I need to find the restroom." Julian nodded, already turning to engage another board member, and she escaped into the blessed quiet of an empty corridor. She leaned against cool marble, fighting for breath that wouldn't come. This was a mistake, all of it. She didn't belong here, in this dress, in this world, pretending to be someone who could fit into Julian Hartley's calculated existence. Her phone buzzed. Jackson's name made her heart lurch. "How's it going?" Julian being appropriately robotic. She shouldn't respond, shouldn't encourage whatever this was between them that couldn't exist outside of deception and borrowed time. She typed anyway, "I miss you," then deleted it before sending. Footsteps approached. She straightened, prepared to return to the performance, and found Claire Westbrook blocking her path. Up close, Julian's ex was even more polished than at the partner dinner. Blonde hair in a perfect chignon, dress that probably required a team to get into, and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Olivia." Isn't it? We met briefly at the dinner." "I remember." "Of course you do." Claire moved closer, voice dropping to intimate conspiratorial tones. "I wanted to apologize if I seemed cold. It's just strange seeing Julian with someone so unexpected." The pause before the last word carried volumes. "I'm sure," Olivia said carefully. "We dated for 3 years, you know. I thought we'd marry. Victoria certainly ought so." Claire examined her manicure, "But Julian ended things because I wanted something real, actual emotional intimacy. He said it was a distraction from his work." Each word landed like a carefully placed blade. "He's different now," Olivia said, not sure if she was defending Julian or trying to convince herself. "Is he?" Claire's smile was pitying. "Or did he just get better at faking it? I've seen you two together multiple times now. He's attentive in public, certainly. But there's no warmth there. No real connection." She leaned in. "You're a performance for the board. Once the partnership is secured, how long do you think this lasts?" Olivia wanted to argue, to defend what she had with Julian. But the words stuck, because Claire was right. What she had with Julian was exactly what she'd been paid for. Appropriate, professional, temporary. What she'd had with Jackson was the dangerous part, the real part. "If you'll excuse me," Olivia said, moving past. Claire's voice followed her. "He's incapable of love, Olivia. The sooner you accept that, the less it will hurt when he ends this." She made it back to the ballroom on autopilot, searching for Julian through the crowd. Found him in conversation with an older gentleman. Saw him laugh at something, a sound so controlled it was almost mechanical. Then she saw him check his watch. A small gesture, barely noticeable, but it told her everything. He was tracking time, calculating when this event could end, when he could return to work and efficiency and the life that didn't require messy human connection. The realization settled over her like cold water. Claire was right. This was always temporary. The only question was whether Olivia would survive it intact. "There you are." Julian appeared at her elbow. "Victoria wants us for photographs." She let him guide her to where a photographer had set up. Let him position her with that same careful precision he applied to everything. His arm around her waist was correct, but lifeless. His smile for the camera was perfect and empty. The flash went off, capturing a lie so beautiful it might as well have been truth. After photographs, dinner. Olivia found herself seated between Julian and a board member whose name she immediately forgot. Courses appeared and disappeared, food she barely tasted. Wine that might have been expensive or poison for all she could tell. Julian was in his element, discussing cases and strategy with the ease of someone who'd been bred for exactly this. When he spoke to her, it was to include her in conversation appropriately. Never too much attention, never too little. Perfectly calibrated. She thought of Jackson's greenhouse confessions, his descriptions of childhood escapes, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than a prop in someone else's story. Halfway through the main course, Victoria stood to give a speech about the foundation's work. Olivia barely heard it, too focused on the ache in her chest that felt like grief for something she'd never actually had. When the speech ended and mingling resumed, Julian excused himself to speak with Judge Whitmore. Olivia stood alone in the glittering crowd, invisible again despite the expensive dress and careful styling. She made her way to the terrace, needing air that didn't taste like perfume and performance. The October night was sharp, cutting through silk like accusation. City lights sprawled below, indifferent to her small crisis. Beautiful view. She turned to find a man she didn't recognize, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of handsome that came with wealth and personal trainers. "It is," she agreed neutrally. "Marcus Hartley." He extended his hand. "Julian's cousin, and you must be the mysterious Olivia who's captured his attention." The cousin, the one competing for the partnership. "I wouldn't say mysterious," she said, shaking his hand briefly. "No, I would. Julian's kept you very quiet. Makes one wonder what he's hiding." Marcus leaned against the balcony railing, too close. "Or who's hiding what?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Come now." Julian Hartley, confirmed bachelor. Suddenly producing a girlfriend right before the partnership vote? It's almost too convenient. Her stomach dropped. "Our relationship has nothing to do with his career, doesn't it?" Victoria's been quite vocal about wanting him settled, stable, less married to his work. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Funny how you appeared exactly when needed, like a solution to a problem. Because that's exactly what she was, a purchased solution." "If you'll excuse me, I'm not judging," Marcus continued. "Actually, I admire the strategy. It's very Julian. Clinical. Effective. I just wonder if you know that's all you are." She left before he could see how completely the words had landed. Returned to the ballroom searching for Julian, needing to leave, to end this night that had become unbearable. She found him near the bar, and her breath caught. Because he was laughing. Really laughing. Head tilted back. Genuine amusement transforming his face into something almost unrecognizable. Beautiful and warm and alive. Then she saw who he was talking to. Claire. Close enough to be intimate, her hand on his arm. Both of them comfortable in a way that spoke of history and understanding. Something shattered in Olivia's chest. She watched them for another moment, watched Julian be more human with his ex than he'd been with her all night, and understood with brutal clarity that Claire had been right. Whatever capacity Julian had for warmth, it wasn't reserved for Olivia. She was the appropriate choice, the strategic acquisition, the performance. She turned away before either of them could see her, headed for the exit, needing to be anywhere but here. Outside, she made it 3 steps. Eps before a hand caught her elbow. "Leaving without saying goodbye? That's rude." She spun, expecting Julian, finding Jackson. He wore an identical tuxedo, but looked nothing like his brother. Hair slightly mussed, bow tie loosened, expression concerned rather than controlled. Real where Julian had been a perfectly maintained facade. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out broken. "I couldn't stay away. I know Julian said he'd handle it, but He saw her face, and his expression shifted. "What happened?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She pulled her arm free. "I need to go." "Olivia, talk to me." "Why? So you can tell me more pretty lies? Make me feel special for another night before this whole thing ends and I go back to being invisible?" Jackson flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not. It is exactly that." Tears threatened, and she refused to let them fall. "You're Jackson pretending to be Julian. I'm the paralegal pretending to be appropriate. None of this is real. It's real for me." "Is it? Or are you just better at performing than your brother?" The words were cruel, designed to hurt, and they landed perfectly. She saw the impact in his eyes, the way his careful composure cracked. "If that's what you think," he said quietly, "then maybe you're right. Maybe none of this was real after all." He walked away, back into the gala, leaving her alone in the cold with her expensive dress and her breaking heart and the certainty that she'd just destroyed the only genuine thing in this entire manufactured disaster. Olivia didn't remember calling a car or giving her address. The ride home passed in a blur of city lights and the taste of regret. Her phone stayed silent. No texts from Jackson, no calls from Julian, wondering where his appropriate girlfriend had disappeared to. She made it to her apartment, closed the door, and finally let herself break. The dress that had made her feel beautiful hours ago now felt like a costume she couldn't wait to shed. She changed into old sweats and her college hoodie, scrubbed off makeup that had taken an hour to apply, and sat on her secondhand couch, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. Not Jackson. Julian. Where are you? Victoria is asking questions. Not are you okay or what happened. Just concern about appearances. She typed back, not feeling well. Had to leave. Sorry. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, understood. We'll discuss Monday. That was it. No follow-up. No concern. Just clinical acknowledgement that she'd failed to complete her contracted duties. A knock at her door made her jump. For one stupid, hopeful moment, she thought Jackson had followed her. Instead, she found a delivery person with an envelope. Inside, a check for $25,000 and a note in precise handwriting. Terms fulfilled, bonus included for inconvenience, contract concluded. Thank you for your professionalism. J. Hartley. She stared at the note, at the formal signature, and felt something inside her turn to ice. He'd ended it. Just like that. One bad night, one early exit, and Julian had terminated their arrangement with the same efficiency he probably used to end vendor contracts. The money should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like payment for services rendered. Like confirmation that she'd been exactly what Marcus said, a convenient solution to a temporary problem. Her phone rang. This time, Jackson. She let it go to voicemail. Couldn't bear to hear his voice when she didn't know what was real anymore. He called again and again. On the 4th attempt, she turned off her phone entirely. Saturday disappeared into a haze of avoiding thoughts and screening calls. Ben texted. Treatment had gone well, he was recovering. When could they celebrate? She sent back emojis and excuses. Couldn't face his questions about why she sounded hollow. Sunday morning brought another knock. This time she checked the peephole first. Jackson stood in her hallway, looking like he hadn't slept, still in yesterday's clothes, hair a disaster. She opened the door because not opening it felt cowardly. You look terrible, she said. Yeah, well, spent the night trying to figure out what I did wrong. He leaned against the doorframe. Can I come in? She should say no, should end this cleanly, take her money, return to invisible obscurity. She stepped aside. Her apartment had never felt smaller than with Jackson Hartley standing in it. He looked around at her mismatched furniture, the stack of case files on her table, the photo of her and Ben on the fridge, and she saw him seeing her, really seeing who she was when she wasn't wearing silk and pretending. Julian sent a check, she said. Ended the contract. So whatever this is, she gestured between them, it's over. He did what? Jackson's voice went dangerously quiet. Paid me in full, plus bonus. We're done. Did he explain why? Does it matter? The arrangement was always temporary. I knew that going in. Jackson moved closer, and she saw the anger in him now. Not at her, at his brother, at the situation, at all of it. Friday night, at the gala. What happened before you tried to leave? She didn't want to relive it, but the words came anyway. His cousin's implications, Claire's warnings. Watching Julian laugh with his ex, while Olivia stood alone in a room full of people who would never see her as anything but inappropriate. I realized Claire was right, she finished. I was a performance. For Julian. That's all I ever was. And for me? The question hung between them, weighted with everything unsaid. I don't know, she whispered. You're good at performing, maybe too good. How do I know what was real? Jackson ran his hands through his hair, that gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when emotions were too big for his careful control. You want to know what was real? Fine. He turned to face her fully. The greenhouse was real. Every word I said about seeing you, about wanting to know you, real. The partner dinner when I couldn't stop touching you, real. Tuesday night when I almost kissed you and stopped because I knew if I started I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. Painfully, devastatingly real. Eel, his voice cracked on the last word. I switched with Julian because I wanted to sabotage him. That part's true. But I stayed switched because being around you felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. He laughed bitter. The irony isn't lost on me. I lied my way into the most genuine connection I've ever had. Olivia's eyes burned. But it can't be real. It was all built on deception. Then let's make it real. No more Julian. No more fake relationship. Just you and me, starting over. Jackson, I'm in love with you. The words came out raw, unpolished. Nothing like the smooth charm she'd seen him deploy at family events. I know it's too soon and too complicated, and possibly the stupidest thing I've ever admitted, but it's true. I fell in love with you somewhere between fake smiles and real confessions. And I can't unfeel it just because the circumstances were insane. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it physically hurt. How do I trust that? Her voice barely functioned. How do I trust any of this when everything started as a lie? The question broke something in his expression. He nodded slowly, stepped back. You can't, that's fair. He moved toward the door and she felt the loss of him like a physical wound. For what it's worth, I meant everything. Every word, every moment, every feeling I was stupid enough to develop. He was leaving. This was it, the end of whatever they'd had or hadn't had, real or imagined. Jackson, wait. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. I don't know what's real either, she said. But I know that when I was with you, I felt seen. Not appropriate or strategic or suitable enough. Just seen. Now he turned, and the hope in his face nearly destroyed her. That's real, Liv. That's the realest thing. But we can't. Your family, the contract, Julian, is all noise. Background noise to what actually matters. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides. Tell me you didn't feel it. Tell me the greenhouse was just performance. Tell me Tuesday night meant nothing. She couldn't. The lies wouldn't come. It meant everything, she whispered. That's what terrifies me. Jackson's hands came up to frame her face, gentle and sure. Good. Be terrified with me. We'll figure out the rest. He kissed her. Not the performance kiss from the gala that she'd only heard about. This was different. Desperate and honest and searching, like he was trying to prove through touch what words couldn't convey. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers gripped his shirt, and for one perfect moment, nothing existed except this. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I have to tell you something, he said. If it's bad, can it wait? I'm still processing the good. It's about Julian, about why he ended the contract. The real world crashed back in. Olivia stepped away, needing distance to think clearly. What about him? I went to see him after you left the gala. We fought, actually fought, not just the Cold War we've been waging for 2 years. Jackson's jaw tightened. He saw us on the terrace, heard what you said about none of it being real. Her stomach dropped. Oh God, he ended the contract because he thought you wanted out, that you'd figured out you were just a transaction to him and deserved better. Jackson met her eyes. He was trying to do the right thing for once, let you go cleanly. That's not, I didn't mean. But she had meant it, in that moment, had believed every word. He also told me to stay away from you, said I'd already complicated things enough, that you deserved someone who could be honest from the start. Jackson's voice went quiet. He wasn't wrong. What did you say? That I was in love with you, and he could try to stop me, but it wouldn't work. He smiled, but it was edged with pain. We said a lot of things we can't take back, but the core of it was this. He knows I love you, and he's stepping aside. The generosity of it, Julian letting go of his solution, his strategy, because he'd glimpsed something real, made her throat tight. I need to talk to him, she said. Why? Jackson's voice carried careful neutrality, but she saw the fear beneath. Because I don't want to build something with you on the rubble of your relationship with your brother. Because he deserves honesty too. She touched Jackson's face, made him look at her, and because I need him to know I'm choosing you. Actually choosing you, not just defaulting because the contract ended. Understanding crossed Jackson's features. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm a mess who fell for a man while pretending to date his twin. Remarkable isn't the word I'd use. It's exactly the word. He kissed her again, softer this time. Go talk to Julian. I'll be here when you're done, if you want me to be. I want you to be. The certainty in her own voice surprised her, but it was true. Somewhere between greenhouse confessions and terrace disasters, she'd fallen in love with Jackson Hartley. Messy, complicated. Built on lies that had become truth, but real nonetheless. Monday morning found Olivia standing outside Julian's office, the check he'd sent clutched in her hand. His assistant, still nameless, still dismissive, barely glanced up. He's not seeing anyone this morning. Tell him Olivia Munro is here. He'll see me. The assistant made a call, surprise flickering across her face. Go in. Julian sat behind his desk exactly as he had that first morning. Precise and controlled and untouchable. But something had shifted. The ice in his eyes had thawed into something almost human. Miss Munro, I didn't expect to see you again. She crossed to his desk, laid the check on its surface. I can't accept this. It's what we agreed upon. The terms were for a full week. I didn't complete the contract. You completed enough. His gaze moved to the window, the city beyond. Victoria approved of you. The board noticed. The partnership was secured this morning. You fulfilled your function. The clinical language would have hurt days ago. Now it just sounded sad. I'm not keeping money I didn't earn, Julian, but I wanted to return it in person to say thank you. That got his attention. He looked at her, really looked, and she saw the question in his eyes. For what? Using you as a strategic asset? For giving me a chance to meet your brother, for stepping aside when you realized he loved me. She sat in the chair she'd occupied weeks ago when this started. And for showing me that appropriate isn't the same as right. Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an unfamiliar softness. Jackson called me Saturday, quite angry, accused me of sabotaging things between you because I couldn't handle seeing him happy. Were you? Perhaps partially. He smiled, and it was genuine, it's brittle. Mostly I ended the contract because I saw how you looked at him versus how you looked at me. You deserved more than appropriate, Miss Munro. You deserved real. The admission cost him something. She saw it in the tightness around his eyes, the careful control reasserting itself. For what it's worth, she said quietly, you're capable of more than you think. You just have to let yourself feel it. Feelings are inefficient. They're also what makes us human. Julian stood, came around the desk, extended his hand. I hope my brother treats you better than I did. Though given his track record for impulsive decisions, that's not guaranteed. She shook his hand, felt the finality in it. Thank you, Julian, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Dating a Hartley is complicated enough. Dating the rebellious twin? He almost smiled. You'll earn every moment of happiness you manage to carve out. She left his office knowing she'd never stand in it again, that this chapter was closed. But she left with something unexpected. Respect for Julian's capacity to choose someone else's happiness over his own strategy. Outside the building, Jackson waited by his car, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. How did it go? He's letting us figure this out. She crossed to him, let him pull her close. No more interference. And what are we figuring out, exactly? How to build something real out of all the fake. How to date, actually, not performatively. How to tell my brother I fell in love with a man I met while pretending to be his brother's girlfriend. Jackson laughed. The sound genuine and warm. That last one should be interesting. You have no idea. Ben's going to have questions. I'm good with questions. I'm an architect. We answer impossible structural problems daily. He kissed her temple. This is just another impossible problem. Except this time, the foundation's already there. We just have to build honestly on it. That's unexpectedly poetic. I contain multitudes, remember? She looked up at him, this man who'd crashed into her life wearing his brother's face and ended up showing her his own heart, and felt the terrifying certainty of being exactly where she was meant to be. So what now? She asked. Now I take you to breakfast. Real breakfast, not strategic brunch. And then I show you the affordable housing project I'm designing. And then, maybe, if you're not sick of me yet, we figure out what a real first date looks like. That sounds perfect. It was, messy and complicated and built on a foundation of lies that had somehow transformed into truth, but perfect nonetheless. 3 weeks later, Olivia sat in a coffee shop she'd discovered with Jackson, small, local, the kind of place where the barista knew her order, and tried to focus on her paralegal exam study materials. The test was in 2 days. She should be panicking. Instead, she kept glancing at her phone, waiting for a text that hadn't come in hours. Jackson had been pulled into an emergency client meeting that morning, something about permits and zoning issues that required immediate attention. He'd kissed her goodbye at dawn, promised to call during lunch, and then disappeared into radio silence. She told herself it was fine. He was working. She was studying. This was normal relationship stuff. Independent lives that intersected rather than consumed each other. Except a small, poisonous voice whispered that maybe this was how it started. The slow fade. The realization that the intensity of their beginning couldn't sustain itself in mundane reality. Her phone buzzed, finally, but it wasn't Jackson. Julian. Miss Monroe, I need to speak with you. It's urgent. My office, if you're available. The formal tone sent ice through her veins. She'd barely spoken to Julian since that morning in his office 3 weeks ago. They'd maintained careful distance, her by leaving the firm entirely, him by respecting the space she'd requested. She texted back, "Is Jackson okay?" "He's fine. This concerns a different matter. Please." The please did it. Julian Hartley didn't say please. 20 minutes later, she stood in his office for what felt like the 100th time, except now, everything was different. He looked tired, she noticed. More human than she'd ever seen him. Expensive suit and perfect posture, unable to hide whatever was weighing on him. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I'll be direct. I'm concerned about my brother." "What do you mean? Has he seemed different to you? Distracted? Distant?" Her stomach clenched. "He's been busy with work. The housing project is stalled. Has been for a week." Julian pulled up something on his laptop, turned it to face her. "These are the permit applications. He hasn't touched them since the initial filing. His partner at the firm has been covering, but she called me yesterday. Said Jackson's been missing meetings, not returning calls." Olivia stared at the screen, at evidence that Jackson had been lying. Not about big things, maybe, but about where he was, what he was doing. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Because he won't talk to me. We don't have that kind of relationship." Julian's expression was carefully neutral, but she heard the pain beneath. "But he talks to you. Or he did. I thought perhaps you'd know if something was wrong." "I don't. He's been—" She trailed off, memories reorganizing themselves into patterns she'd been too hopeful to see. The lunch dates canceled. Canceled last minute. The evenings he'd seemed distant, distracted. The way he'd pulled away slightly when she tried to discuss meeting Ben properly. "He's pulling away," she finished quietly. Julian was silent for a moment. Then, "Jackson has a pattern. He commits intensely, burns bright, and then panics when things become real. It's happened in every serious relationship he's had." "You're saying I'm just another pattern." "I'm saying my brother struggles with sustained intimacy. He wants it desperately. But when he gets it, the fear of losing it or failing at it becomes overwhelming." Julian leaned back. "I'm telling you this not to hurt you, but to prepare you. If he's retreating, it's not about you. It's about him battling demons he's never successfully defeated." She should be angry, should resent Julian's interference, his clinical assessment of his brother's psychology. Instead, she just felt tired. "Why do you care? You got your partnership. We're not pretending anymore. What Jackson and I do isn't your concern. He's still my brother." Simple words, but they carried the weight of complicated history. "And despite everything, I don't want to see either of you hurt by his inability to handle what he claims to want." Olivia left Julian's office with her thoughts in chaos, took the subway to Jackson's apartment, a converted loft in a neighborhood that balanced artistic and expensive, and used the key he'd given her 2 weeks ago with a smile and a, "This means you're stuck with me." The door opened to darkness and silence. Empty. She checked her phone. Still no text. It was nearly 7. He'd been unreachable for almost 12 hours. She should leave. Should respect his space. Trust that whatever was happening would resolve itself. Instead, she sat on his couch and waited. He came home at 9:30, stopping dead when he saw her in the dim light. "Liv, what are you— I thought you had late study sessions." "I did. Then your brother called." She watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, guilt, defensiveness. "Want to tell me what's going on? Or should I just believe the permit story?" Jackson set down his bag with careful precision, the kind of control that meant he was anything but. Julian had no right. He was worried. "So am I." She stood. "Where have you been, Jackson? And don't say work, because I know the project stalled." I've been handling it. By lying to me? Her voice cracked, despite efforts to keep it steady. By disappearing for hours and pretending everything's fine? He ran his hands through his hair. That tell she recognized, and she saw it. The panic beneath the charm, the fear he'd been hiding behind smiles and kisses and promises he wasn't sure he could keep. I'm not lying. I needed space to think. About what? About us. About whether I'm capable of this. Of being what you need. The words came out raw. You deserve someone stable, someone who doesn't come with family dysfunction and a history of running when things get hard. So you're running. I'm being realistic. But he couldn't meet her eyes. We started this as a lie, Liv. Maybe we were fooling ourselves, thinking it could become something else. There it was, the fear Julian had warned about, manifesting exactly as predicted. Is that what you really think? Or is that what you tell yourself when you're scared? Does it matter? He finally looked at her, and she saw the anguish there. Either way, the result's the same. I'm going to disappoint you. Better to end it now before... Before what? Before it gets too real? Too late to back out without casualties? She moved closer, made him look at her. Newsflash, Jackson, it's already real. It's already too late. You don't get to decide for both of us that this won't work. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Potential hurt? That's what love is. Risk and vulnerability, and choosing someone despite the fear. He flinched at the word love, and that told her everything. I can't, he said quietly. I'm sorry, I can't do this. The words hit like physical blows. She'd known, somewhere deep down, that this was coming. Julian had warned her. Jackson's own confessions about struggling with sustained connection had been there all along. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Fine, she said, voice hollow. If you want out, I won't stop you. But own it, Jackson. Don't pretend this is noble protection. This is you being terrified and running like you always do. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I do love you. The real you. Flaws and fears included. And I would have stayed through the hard parts, through the doubt and the panic. But I can't fight for us alone. She left before he could respond, before she could see whether her words landed or bounced off walls he'd already rebuilt. The subway ride home blurred. Her apartment felt too quiet. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, phone silent beside her, and tried to remember what she'd been before Jackson Hartley crashed into her life, wearing his brother's face. 4 days passed. The paralegal exam came and went in a haze of legal terminology and multiple choice questions she barely registered. Ben called twice. She let it go to voicemail. Couldn't handle his questions about why she sounded broken. The money from Julian sat in her account, untouched. She should use it for rent, for bills, for building the life she'd been working toward. Instead, it felt like blood money, for a heart she'd been stupid enough to offer. On the 5th day, Ben showed up at her apartment unannounced, looking healthy and furious. Okay, what happened? He wheeled past her into the living room. And don't say nothing, because you've been dodging my calls and apparently forgot I'm not an idiot. She should deflect, should protect him from her mess. Instead, she told him everything. The fake relationship, the twin switch, falling for Jackson, the way he'd panicked and pulled away. All of it spilled out in a rush of words she couldn't contain. When she finished, Ben was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight. You fake dated a lawyer to help me, fell for his architect twin, and now you're heartbroken. Heartbroken because said twin got scared of real feelings? That's the summary, yes. And you're just accepting it? Letting him walk away? What else can I do? I told him how I felt. He chose fear. Ben wheeled closer, took her hand. Liv, you once told me that fighting means refusing to disappear. You said it when I wanted to give up treatment because the cost was too much. His voice got quiet. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Maybe this guy needs someone to fight for him too. He doesn't want me to. Maybe he doesn't know what he wants. Maybe he's too scared to figure it out alone. Ben squeezed her hand. I'm not saying chase someone who clearly isn't ready, but I am saying you're allowed to fight for something that mattered, for someone who mattered. She thought about Jackson's greenhouse confessions, the way he'd looked at her like she was miraculous. the morning coffees and architectural sketches and quiet moments that had felt more real than anything in her carefully constructed life. "I don't know how," she admitted. "Start with showing up. The rest figures itself out." That afternoon, Olivia stood outside Jackson's architecture firm, a converted warehouse in a neighborhood she'd only visited once. Through the glass walls, she could see him at a drafting table, bent over designs, alone. She almost walked away, almost let fear and pride and self-protection win. Then she remembered Ben's words, remembered that love without risk was just appropriateness, safe and hollow and ultimately meaningless. She opened the door. Jackson looked up, and the expression that crossed his face was complicated. Hope and fear and longing, all tangled together. "Liv." Her name came out like a prayer and a question. "I'm not here to beg," she said, staying near the door. "Or to convince you to feel something you don't. But I am here to tell you that you're wrong." "About what?" "About us being a mistake. About you being incapable of this." She moved closer. "You told me once that I made you want the boring parts, the coffee in the morning, the quiet evenings. That I was the first person who made you want to stay." "I meant that." "Then why are you running?" He set down his pencil, stood, and she saw the exhaustion in him. The battle he'd been waging alone. Because everyone leaves eventually. My mother chose social standing over connection. Victoria chose control. Even Julian chose work over relationship. His voice cracked. "So I learned to leave first, before they could. Before it could hurt worse than loneliness already does." The honesty of it, the raw wound beneath the charm, broke something open in her chest. "I'm not everyone, Jackson, and you're not your family's mistakes." She closed the distance between them. "But I can't prove that to you. You have to choose to believe it. What if I fail? What if I hurt you? Then we'll deal with it together." That's what real relationships are. Choosing each other through the hard parts, not just the easy ones. He looked at her like she was something precious and impossible. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. I don't deserve you either. But maybe that's not the point." She took his hands. "Maybe the point is that we found each other anyway, and we get to decide what that means." "I'm terrified," he whispered. "Good. Be terrified with me. We'll figure out the rest." He pulled her into his arms then, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. She felt his heart racing against hers, felt the tremor in his hands, and knew this wasn't fixed. This was just the beginning of figuring out how to build something real from all the broken pieces. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I'm sorry I'm a mess about it." "I love you too. We can be a mess together." They stood there in his empty office while afternoon light slanted through windows. Two people who'd found each other through lies and were learning to stay through truth. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And sometimes that was enough. 2 weeks after Jackson's office confession, Olivia woke to find him gone. Not disappeared into fear gone, but actually gone. His side of the bed cold, no note, phone going straight to voicemail. The panic was immediate and visceral. This was it. He'd realized he couldn't do it after all, had run like Julian predicted, like his pattern suggested, like she'd been terrified he would, despite his promises. She was pulling on clothes, preparing to do something desperate and possibly humiliating, when her phone buzzed. "Ben." "Hey, so don't freak out, but I may have done something." Her stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "I invited your boyfriend to breakfast, to officially meet him, as your brother, not as your medical crisis." "Ben, where are you?" "That diner near campus. The one with the terrible coffee you love." "He's actually pretty cool, Liv. Little nervous, but..." She ended the call and was out the door in under 2 minutes. The diner was exactly as terrible as she remembered. Cracked vinyl booths, burned coffee, breakfast food that tasted like nostalgia and grease. And in the corner booth, Jackson sat across from her 19-year-old brother, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. Both looked up as she approached. "Liv, hey." Jackson stood, and she saw the relief in his face. "Ben texted this morning. Said he wanted to meet properly. I should have told you. But I made him promise not to," Ben finished. "Wanted to make sure he wasn't a serial killer before I gave my official brotherly approval." "And?" Olivia slid into the booth next to Jackson, her heart still racing. "Not a serial killer. Possibly too good-looking to be trusted, but that's a different concern. Ben grinned. Also, he's been showing me the affordable housing designs. They're actually incredible. Jackson's hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. An apology for the panic and a promise that he was here, staying, choosing this. They had breakfast, actually terrible coffee, and surprisingly good pancakes, while Ben interrogated Jackson with the kind of questions only a younger brother could get away with. What were his intentions? How did he plan to handle his family's obvious dysfunction? Did he understand that if he hurt Olivia, Ben had friends in low places and absolutely no moral qualms about revenge? Jackson handled it with humor and honesty, and Olivia watched the two most important men in her life connect over shared sarcasm and her embarrassment. As they were leaving, Ben pulled her aside while Jackson paid. "He's good for you. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to." "You smile different now, like you're not carrying the whole world by yourself anymore." Ben hugged her. "I approve, for whatever that's worth." "It's worth everything." The next few weeks settled into something that resembled normal life. If normal life included dating a man whose family was Manhattan royalty and whose twin brother was his former fake dating employer, Jackson returned to his housing project with renewed focus. Olivia passed her paralegal exam, third time lucky, and started getting calls from legal aid organizations who'd somehow heard she was available. They had real dates, museums and takeout, and the kind of quiet evenings Jackson had once told her he wanted. They fought about small things, his tendency to lose track of time when designing, her habit of overworking to prove herself, and learned how to resolve them without running. It felt sustainable, real. Then Victoria Hartley called. "Olivia, darling, I'm having a small gathering next week. Nothing formal, just family and a few close friends." A pause heavy with implication. "I do hope you and Jackson can attend, together, officially." This was it. The family's acknowledgement that she and Jackson were real, not a strategic arrangement. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a test she wasn't sure how to pass. "I'll have to check with Jackson," she said carefully. "Of course, do let me know. It would mean a great deal to have you there, both of you." After the call, Olivia sat with the weight of it, meeting Victoria as Jackson's actual girlfriend, not Julian's paid performance. Navigating the family dynamics without a script or contract to hide behind. Jackson found her on the couch, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" She told him about Victoria's call, watched his expression shift from surprise to something more complicated. "You don't have to go," he said. "My mother's gatherings are typically elaborate torture disguised as hospitality. Do you want me to go?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications about where they were heading, what they meant to each other beyond the intensity of their beginning. "I want you anywhere you want to be," Jackson said carefully. "But if you're asking whether I want to show up with you as my actual girlfriend, introduce you to my family as the woman I'm in love with," he moved closer. "Yes, absolutely yes." The certainty in his voice settled something in her chest. "Then we'll go." The gathering was indeed small by Victoria's standards, only 30 people in the Hartley home's formal living room, all of them comfortable with wealth and each other in ways Olivia still wasn't. But this time, Jackson's hand in hers felt like anchor instead of performance. This time, when Victoria's friends asked pointed questions, Jackson deflected with genuine affection rather than strategic politeness. Julian was there, bringing a date that surprised everyone. A law professor from Columbia, intelligent and worn and nothing like Claire. He caught Olivia's eye across the room, raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. They'd never be close, but they'd achieved something like mutual respect. It was Victoria who surprised her most. Halfway through the evening, the matriarch pulled Olivia aside into the same garden where they'd first walked months ago. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said without preamble. "For what?" "For underestimating you, for treating you as suitable rather than exceptional." Victoria's gaze was direct. "When Julian first brought you around, I assumed you were another of his calculated moves. When Jackson revealed the truth, that he'd been switching places, that you'd captured his heart despite the deception, I thought you were an opportunist." Olivia stayed quiet, letting Victoria speak. "But you returned Julian's money. You fought for Jackson when he pushed you away. And you're here now, knowing my family is complicated and possibly more trouble than we're worth." Victoria smiled, and it was almost genuine. That takes either courage or stupidity. I'm choosing to believe it's the former. I love your son, Olivia said simply. The rest is just noise. Jackson is lucky to have found you. Try not to let our family dysfunction destroy what you're building. It wasn't quite approval, but it was close enough. The evening wound down with promises to do this again, with Victoria extracting commitments for holiday gatherings, with the kind of familial obligation that felt less like burden and more like belonging. In the car afterward, Jackson was quiet. You okay? Olivia asked. That went better than expected. Victoria actually smiled at you. Pretty sure that's never happened before. Your mother's not as terrifying as you think. She absolutely is. She's just decided you're acceptable. He glanced at her. Thank you, for tonight, for all of this. For what? Surviving your family's scrutiny? For staying, for choosing this, choosing me, even though it's complicated. She leaned over, kissed him softly. It's not that complicated. I love you. You love me. The rest is details. Important details. Sure, but still just details. They drove in comfortable silence, city lights streaming past, and Olivia felt the future stretching ahead. Uncertain, but possible. Complicated, but worth it. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Monroe? This is David Chen from the Community Legal Alliance. We received your resume and wondered if you'd be interested in discussing a position. We're opening a new office focused on tenant rights and victim advocacy. Her heart stopped. This was it. The dream she'd sketched in notebooks. The work she'd always wanted to do but never thought she could afford. Yes, absolutely yes. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. By the end, she had an interview scheduled and the kind of hope that felt dangerous to hold too tightly. What was that? Jackson asked when she hung up. She told him, watching his face transform with genuine joy. Liv, that's incredible. That's everything you wanted. It doesn't pay much. Definitely not corporate firm money. So? You'll do work that matters. That's worth more than any salary. He pulled over suddenly, turned to face her. I'm so proud of you. The words hit harder than expected. She'd spent so long trying to prove herself, to be enough, that having someone simply proud, no qualifications, no conditions, felt revolutionary. I haven't gotten the job yet. You will, because you're brilliant and passionate and exactly who they need. She kissed him then, deep and grateful and full of hope for futures they were building separately and together. 2 months later, Olivia sat in a storefront office in a neighborhood most lawyers avoided, surrounded by case files and secondhand furniture and the kind of purpose that made 60-hour weeks feel like calling rather than obligation. The Community Legal Alliance had hired her immediately after the interview, impressed by her experience and her obvious passion for helping people navigate systems designed to exclude them. Jackson appeared in the doorway holding coffee and a bag from the bakery down the street. Lunch delivery, he announced, and possibly an ulterior motive. What kind of motive? He set down the food, pulled out his phone, showed her architectural renderings. Remember how I said I wanted to design affordable housing that was actually beautiful? Of course. I found a property. 3 blocks from here. Zoning approved. Permits in process. 20 units. Mixed income. With ground floor retail space. He zoomed in on one section, including a storefront perfectly sized for a legal aid clinic. If you wanted to expand, eventually. She stared at the designs, at the careful thought he'd put into creating something that would serve the community she was learning to love. Jackson, this is a lot, I know. And there's no pressure. I'm building it regardless. But if you wanted the clinic space, it's yours. Below market rate, flexible lease terms. Why? Because I watched you come alive doing this work. Because you make me want to use my skills for something that matters. He set down the phone, took her hands. Because I love you, and I want to build a life where we're both doing what we're passionate about, together. She kissed him, coffee forgotten, case files pushed aside, and in that moment everything felt possible. 6 months after that, they stood in that same storefront, now expanded, renovated. Filled with people celebrating the Monroe Legal Center's official opening. Ben was there, healthy and finishing his sophomore year. Julian came with his professor girlfriend, stayed longer than expected, even smiled. Victoria attended briefly, wrote a check that made Olivia uncomfortable until Jackson reminded her that his mother's money could do good too. As the celebration wound down, Jackson pulled Olivia onto the small balcony overlooking the street. I have something for you, he said. If it's another building, it's not a building. He handed her an envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a contract, because of course Jackson Hartley would do this with a contract. She read it, tears blurring the words halfway through. The Forever Agreement, he titled it. Below, in his architectural handwriting, terms that made her laugh and cry simultaneously. Party A agrees to love Party B through boring Tuesdays and exciting Fridays. Party B agrees to let Party A design their future, while Party A agrees to let Party B advocate for their values. Both parties agree that fear is acceptable, running is not, and communication beats avoidance every time. Term, indefinite, renegotiable never, enforceable by kisses and coffee. At the bottom, his signature, and a space for hers. Is this? She couldn't finish the question. A proposal? Yes. Unconventional and probably not legally binding, but yes. He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone the exact color of her eyes. Marry me, Olivia Munro. Build a life with me that's complicated and real and nothing like what we started with. She should make him wait. Should point out they'd only been actually dating for 8 months. Should be practical. Yes, she said instead, because practical had never been their story anyway. He slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her while the city sprawled below them and their future stretched ahead. Uncertain, but chosen. Complicated, but theirs. Inside, through the window, their family and friends raised glasses. Ben caught her eye and grinned. Julian nodded once, approval and acceptance in the gesture. Victoria, surprisingly, smiled. So, Jackson said, pulling back just enough to see her face. Was it worth it? The fake relationship, the twin switch, all the chaos? Olivia looked at the ring on her finger, the legal center behind them. The man who'd crashed into her life, pretending to be someone else, and ended up showing her exactly who he was. Every confusing, terrifying, beautiful moment of it. Even the part where I tried to run? Especially that part. It taught you that you could stay. He kissed her again, and somewhere in the background she heard Ben start a toast. Heard laughter and celebration and the sound of people who'd become family through the strangest of circumstances. 6 months ago, Olivia Munro had been invisible, drowning, desperate enough to accept an insane proposal from a cold lawyer. She pretended to be someone's girlfriend, fallen for his twin brother, lost herself, and found herself in the wreckage. Now, in a legal aid center in a neighborhood that needed her, wearing a ring from a man who'd learned to choose her daily, surrounded by work that mattered and people who'd become home, she was finally, fully visible. Not because someone saw her, because she'd learned to see herself. The rest, the love, the dream, the life, was just the beautiful aftermath of that one crucial moment of recognition. And it was more than enough. It was everything.